Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews. Today we're going to be checking out another of the Collecta 2022 line, and this is one that is greatly anticipated, I think, by many people. Again, probably one of the most anticipated from this line, as we have their brand new Edmontosaurus here. And I was so psyched about this because I love Edmontosaurus, and it's even cooler now that we now have a brand new Edmontosaurus with a brand new appearance. Well, maybe not brand new at this point, but regardless, it's still fairly new as far as what we believe Edmontosaurus looked like, and I think that Collecta has really captured the overall beauty of Edmontosaurus in both the sculpt as well as the paint job. It's definitely a very fun-looking paint scheme they've given it. I think the only thing that I'm not a huge fan of are the splotches of green throughout. I feel like it probably would have looked a little better if we didn't have the green on it, but at least, it's some color variation, so it's nice to have more color than less color, I guess. But regardless, again, a pretty darn striking looking model as it's just walking along on all fours. Almost looks a little panicked, kind of. And like the positioning of the legs kind of make it look like it was walking, and maybe it just kind of slammed on the brakes, and now it's like starting to maybe take a step back, and it's obviously letting out a vocalization. So my interpretation of this is maybe it's just spotted some sort of a predator or something that has it alarmed up ahead, and it's kind of backpedaling a little bit. Sort of what I get out of the appearance of this, but again, an absolutely beautiful looking sculpt, and it is a massive figure. As far as a Collecta figure goes, it is definitely a very, very large one. Now, of course, it is a deluxe figure, so you expect them to be big, and especially when it comes to an Edmontosaurus, because it is a pretty darn big species of dinosaur, but I just wasn't prepared for it to be quite as large as it is. It honestly is a very, very impressively sized figure, so let's go ahead and jump straight to a closer look at this right now. So starting up here at the head sculpt of our Edmontosaurus, you can see that the detailing aspect is really beautiful. I like that we have some larger scales back here in the cheekbone, but as we transition closer to the mouth, you can see how small those scales get. They get very, very small, very minute. You can see some nice creasing right there as well, showing off the open mouth of the Edmontosaurus and how the skin there is reacting to the movement of the mouth opening. As you come up here to the top of the head, you can again see more beautiful scale detail, and just in general some really nice structure to the head of the Edmontosaurus. The nostrils are nicely sculpted out, and they are very nicely highlighted with a darker coloration. The beak as well sports some pretty nice fine detailing to it, and it has a grayish coloration for the coloration of the beak. The inside of the mouth, you can see the tongue in there is pretty nicely sculpted. You can also see it has a nice pinkish tone in there. The upper side also sports some pretty darn nice detailing, but very nice, very realistic tone of color, I think, for the inside of the mouth of the Edmontosaurus. You can also see the eyes are painted with a black, and they have a really nice gloss coat to them, so they shine very realistically. They look very lifelike and alive. And you can also see that this figure has a beautiful dark wash, and I love that aspect of it. I absolutely love when companies give their figures dark washes, and Collecta has provided this one with a great dark wash. The majority of the head, and actually the body in general, has some really nice brownish tones, but there's also like some white dry brushing in certain spots you can see picking up, giving it some alternate color variation. And you also have, again, this green. You can see the green borders around the eye, runs up here along the mouth area. I'm not a huge fan of the green. I wasn't super sold on it in the promotional images, and I'm still not now, but at least, it doesn't look terrible. It definitely doesn't look that bad, but I feel like it could have blended together a little nicer if this dark wash was included in the greenish areas like it is in the brown, like it kind of disappears once it hits the green, but it still looks really nice regardless. As you move back here, you can see the ear. The ear is nicely sculpted and also quite nicely elaborated with a darker brown. We up here have the crest on the top of the head, which sports a beautiful, very vibrant red to it, and also some nice detailing within. You can see some nice scale detail and nice texturing and everything up there, and the red kind of runs down around the top of the head a little bit as well, which looks pretty nice. As you move down into the neck, look at those beautiful scales down here in the neck. Very large, very rugged looking scaling as we come down here a little further into the neck, and you can really see how nice that dark wash looks now on the figure and the way it makes those scales pop beautifully. You can also see, again, those nice variations of browns as well as some darker browns that start to stripe down here and design through the course of the body. You can also see an incredibly smooth transition from the brown down here into the throat as we have a nice off-white more like an off-white, bordering in certain ways that I look at it, almost like a very, very light hint of green to it as well, but definitely a very nice appearance as far as that goes, and again, a super smooth transition, and that paintwork definitely makes the figure look a lot nicer. As you move back a little further into the body, you can see some nice creasing here. The neck is leaning up, so you can kind of see the creasing up here on the top of the neck running down here into the side. You can also see those scales taper off to a much, much smaller scaling the further back into the shoulder blade area that you get on the figure. As you move down here, you can again see some nice creasing at the base of the arm. Moving down into the arm, you can see some nice creasing as well in the joint of the elbow. Beautiful scale detail. Again, you can see how that nice white dry brushing just shows up kind of sporadically, but how the dark wash makes all of the scales pop no matter where you look. And as you go a little further down here, you get into those hooves like we see on the Edmontosaurus, and they are nicely painted with a gray, similar to what we saw on the beak, but you can also see that the color transitions from the brown into a green as you reach down here into the hands. So again, that green shows up here on the figure. And then as we move back up here, you can see more of that green kind of overtake the lower part of the stomach region. Some nice skin folds right here. But again, the scale detail continues to look incredible throughout the course of the figure. An absolutely gorgeous looking sculpt. You can see more of those variations again of like some kind of off whites and browns, as well as the darker browns running down here that stripe down throughout the course of the body. You can also see some white ridges running along the top of the Edmontosaurus. As we move back here a little further, you can see some creasing here as that leg is pushing into the stomach, so you do see some nice creasing right there. You can also see the hip bone a little bit right there as far as it being elaborated from the skin, as well as some nice muscle definition. But I really love the way Collecta has been displaying their muscle definition in this newest wave of figures, the 2022 figures, because although it is there, it's definitely nicely present. It's not overly defined like you often see on different dinosaur figures, so I think it definitely gives it a bit more of a realistic look with how they've been sculpting out the muscle definition on their newest round of figures. As you move down the course of the leg, you can again see some nice color difference as you have like a darker brown back here, and even actually a different shade of darker brown than the darker brown that we see up there. So it's nice to see even more color showing up. The calf muscle again nicely defined, and we have, if the dark wash wasn't good enough to pop the scales for you, again that white dry brushing showing up here and there will definitely help with that as well. As you move down into the rear foot also looks nice. Beautiful detailing running down the course of the toes. Again, some nice scale detail down the course of the foot down into the toes, and the toes are painted with that gray, again like we saw on the hooves here in the front, the hoof-like appearance, I should say, to the front, and then the gray that we see on the beak. And then as we move back up, you can actually see some nice creasing in the joint of the knee, which I did not see or mention before, but you can again see more of that green showing up here. Again, just another splotch of it before it tapers off and disappears completely from the dinosaur. As we move out the length of the tail, we again have those pretty nice looking, quite striking stripes running down the course of the figure. The scale detail continues to look really nice as we have larger scales up here the further up into the back you get, and then they taper off to a much smaller scaling the further down you go. You can also see a little bit of a transition of color as we have again this kind of like white or like an off-white that does have some slight variations of greens throughout, but then it transitions to kind of like some light grays as you move out a little further into the tail before tapering off to a completely brown tip for the tail of the Edmontosaurus. And you can see there is a very nice curve to the tail as it leans toward the dinosaur's left and also comes down in a downward position before kind of curving back up there at the tip of the tail. If we turn over here to the opposing side, you can again see that beautiful head sculpt. Again, the very nicely painted eyes, precision painting on the part of Collecta continuously, especially when it comes to their eyes. You can again see that nice vibrant red there on the crest of the Edmontosaurus. The very nicely defined ear, which again I really do quite like. The ear in general is super nicely sculpted as far as the detailing goes. And then as you move down again into the neck, we pick up on those very large scales, very rough and rugged looking, like I had mentioned on the first side. Honestly, they actually kind of caught me by surprise. They're so visually appealing, those large scales, but I just didn't expect them to be there. I didn't notice that on the original prototype, so it's beautiful looking here in hand. I absolutely love that larger scaling there in the neck. And then coming down here into the throat region, again, you can see that lighter tone of color as well as that very nice gradual transition to it. And then moving back here, you can see again some nice stretching of the skin here, leading off of that front leg. As you move down, you can again see some more creases in the joint of the elbow. This one here is absolutely planted on the ground. You can see the other one is lifting up. This one's holding the entire front half of the dinosaur. So you can see some nice tensing throughout the course of the arm. Again, a transition to a green. As you move up here, you can see a little bit more of the stomach region due to the leg being pulled back a little bit further than what we had seen on the previous side. So you can see how nice the scale detail looks, as well as how smooth the transition is from the green down into that lighter underbelly. You can also see how nice the scale detail continues to look as you move up the back of the dinosaur, and just how beautiful that dark wash is that they've applied. And it seems like you can almost see like variations of browns, like you can even see like orangish browns showing up in a few different areas, giving the dinosaur even more color variation, more realistic skin tone, which I really do like that aspect of the figure. And again, the hip bone is pretty nicely elaborated there from the body. Again, the very nicely defined legs, yet again, like I had stated on the previous side, not overly defined, but definitely sculpted out quite nicely. Like you can really see the definition of the musculature is nicely shown, but not overly shown. You can see the kneecap a little bit right there, as well as some creasing in the joint of the knee, and then again the transition back down to the green. You can see as this dinosaur is taking a step, the toes are just about to leave the ground, so only the toes are touching on this side. And then we lead back up here into the tail. You can see more of that green before we transition back out to the very nice variations of browns, as well as that hint of like a gray before we reach the tip, which isn't entirely brown, again with those darker brown stripes. The underside also sports some pretty nice detailing, and we also have the cloaca down here, which is defined with a darker coloration, but you can continue to see how gorgeous that scale detail looks and how bright the underbelly actually is throughout the entire course of the figure. So an absolutely incredible looking Edmontosaurus, definitely one of the best in the Collecta 2022 line, and another incredibly visually appealing figure from Collecta. And like I had stated earlier in the review, one of the most impressive aspects of this model, I think, would be the size, because it definitely has a pretty darn impressive size. And to show you that for a length, you are looking at a little over, actually, I'd say right around 13.5 inches, or about 34, a little over 34 centimeters. And then for a height, I don't know where the highest point, I guess it would be the back, the hip region. You're looking at just shy of 4 3/4 inches, or around 12 centimeters. And then to the top of the crest, a little over 4 1/4 inches, or around 11 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line in comparison to our Collecta Deluxe Edmontosaurus, and you can without question see now in comparison to these figures that the Edmontosaurus definitely sports a very impressive size, really quite large in both the height and length department. Honestly, a really quite massive Collecta figure. And then for another comparison, since we've used him quite often for the Collecta reviews, there is the Dimetrodon, and you can see the Dimetrodon is much smaller than our Edmontosaurus. The Edmontosaurus really quite nicely outsizes the Dimetrodon by quite a lot. And then, and probably the comparison most people are interested in seeing, we have the Safari Ltd Edmontosaurus in comparison to the Collecta version. And look at how much larger the Collecta version is in comparison to the Safari Ltd version. That is a very big difference when it comes to the size department, as the Safari Ltd one is quite dwarfed, honestly, by the Collecta version, although I will say they look pretty cool together. They definitely look like, if you took both of these and then repainted them to look like they're similar in like the same group or whatever, that would look absolutely awesome as far as displaying them together. And maybe the Safari version would be a bit younger than the Collecta version. And then for another comparison, here is the standard-sized Dinochirus in comparison to our Deluxe Edmontosaurus. You can again see that the Edmontosaurus is still really quite large in comparison to even the Dinochirus figure, which that's not really a big figure, it's kind of small, but another figure that is fairly large is the brand new Spinosaurus for the 2022 year, and there is the Edmontosaurus in comparison to the Spino. The Spino definitely sports a longer size, but the Edmontosaurus is still showing that it is a very large figure, even in comparison to the pretty darn nicely sized Spinosaurus. Then we've also got the Collecta Muttaburrasaurus in comparison to the Edmontosaurus. You could see, again, no competition size-wise at all between those. And then actually I could probably just keep this right here and bring in the Ouranosaurus also from Collecta. So again, you can really see that this Edmontosaurus is massive in comparison to many of these, more standard-sized Collecta figures. And then for one final comparison, there is the Collecta Iguanodon in comparison to the Edmontosaurus, again showing you that the Edmontosaurus even outsizes that beautiful Iguanodon from Collecta. So this brand new 2022 Collecta Deluxe Edmontosaurus is an absolutely gorgeous figure. The sculpt is fantastic, sporting a pretty cool pose. I think the pose, again, sort of resembles like the Edmontosaurus being startled by maybe a predator or something up ahead, something it definitely doesn't like because it kind of appears to be almost backpedaling in a hurry and has somewhat of an alarmed look on its face, which I really do quite like. It could definitely create some pretty cool dioramas if you include the Edmontosaurus with some sort of a theropod, maybe a tyrannosaur or something. But on top of the really nice pose, the fine detailing of the figure is exceptionally well done, and the detailing shines quite bright with this figure and with this sculpt because of the very nice paintwork that they've given it with the really nice dark wash. I feel like the dark wash, and I've mentioned it numerous times throughout the course of this review, but I feel like the dark wash really makes all of the detail pop and just amps up the realism of the figure. I think it always amps up the realism of any figure, honestly, when it comes to the dark washes used on any figure ever. I really feel like it just creates such a more realistic appearance, but also highlights the detailing on the figures very nicely, really shows off how nice and highly detailed the figures are. And the dark wash used on this Edmontosaurus is absolutely beautiful, if you ask me, and really ties the paintwork together, as we have quite a bit of coloration to this one. Very nice different tones of browns with lighter and even some shades of like orangish browns in certain areas, as well as the darker browns that kind of stripe down and run along the course of the body with some nice white dry brushing here and there. And then you have some green tones that show up quite randomly throughout the course of the figure. I think it does look nice with the green, but I personally would have preferred it without the green because I just feel like it looks a little out of place in certain areas, but at the same time it doesn't look bad by any means, and it does still look pretty decent as far as the overall grand scheme of things on the figure goes. The crest is beautiful with that very nice vibrant red on it. I really like that aspect as well. And then of course the coloration throughout, the paintwork throughout is very nice and precise, like the coloration of the nostrils, the inside of the mouth, the beak, the eyes. Everything looks great. So as a whole, this Edmontosaurus is just drop dead gorgeous and a definite recommendation from me for the Collecta 2022 year. So make sure that when this does come into stock, you pick it up on Everything Dinosaur. Again, follow along their social media accounts and just keep checking back to their website to keep up to date on everything that they are stocking. And when this does come into stock, definitely pick it up right away because it is a surefire hit, if you ask me. Another beautiful Collecta release. Again, make sure you pick it up when it comes into stock on Everything Dinosaur, and make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.